Hi, I'm Kenzie. Welcome back to my podcast. If you're just joining, welcome. Today we will be talking about my 9th Blues Clues VHS, Magenta Comes Over. This VHS includes Magenta Comes Over and What Does Blue Want to Do with Her Drawing. First, let's talk about Magenta Comes Over. This episode starts out with the phone ringing. It was Magenta. It turned out Magenta was coming over for a visit. Steve and Blue couldn't wait. The question was, what does Blue want to do when Magenta comes over? That's when Blue wanted to play Blues Clues. But first Steve had to get rid of the paw print with a little help from Blue. And so the game Blues Clues has begun. The viewer spotted the first clue, which is Steve. He waited so long to be a clue. After the first clue was found, we hear Shovel and Pail counting to 10 during a game of hide and seek. It was their turn to go find their friends, but all they could find is each other. We wanted to help them find their friends. Our job was to find their friends by following the prints. First, they went to find Duck. Then they went to find Snail. Finally, Steve noticed more footprints that belonged to him. He was just checking. Then Steve and Blue went back inside to find Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper. They were making a snack for when Magenta comes over. They were making race cars. No, not real race cars. Race cars made out of food, so you can eat them after you make them. Get it? Good. So we wanted to help them. Now each race car was going to be different. We just had to figure out the opposites. Mrs. Pepper wanted the carrot for her race car because it was the shortest. The opposite of shortest was longest. So Mr. Salt picked out the longest vegetable, which is celery. Then Mr. Salt wanted the circle crackers for his race car because they were the biggest circles. The opposite of biggest was smallest. So Mrs. Pepper picked out the smallest sized circles, which is peas. Finally, Mrs. Pepper wanted the broccoli for her race car because it was the bumpiest. The opposite of bumpiest was smoothest. So Mr. Salt picked out the smoothest vegetable, which is the mushroom. And so the race cars for Magenta and Blue were complete. As Steve leaves the kitchen pretending to be a race car, the viewer spotted the second clue, which is a smile. After the second clue is found, we hear the thought friends talking in the background. They needed some help. Blue scooted into the thought friend frame to do just that. Steve did too. It turned out the thought friends were playing dress up and needed to pick out 2 costumes that go together. We wanted to help them. First, Fifi dressed as an umpire, and Freddie dressed as a baseball player. Then Freddie dressed as a lifeguard, and Fifi dressed as a swimmer. Finally, Fifi dressed as an astronaut, and Freddie dressed as an alien. Then Steve and Blue scooted back home just in time for mail time. In the letter, one girl said that a guy named Brian was coming over to play. They played with blocks, had a snack, and played dress up with hats. After saying goodbye, it was mail time again. Mailbox had a package for Steve, which is one of his favorite things. He opened it and sees a camera, which he has been looking all over for. That's when the viewer spotted the third clue, which is a camera. That's also when Steve realized we had all 3 clues, and it was time to sit in the thinking chair, which he was already there. It was time to think. We were trying to figure out what Blue wants to do when Magenta comes over, and our clues were Steve, a smile, and a camera. At first, Steve thought Blue wanted him to make the camera smile. Then the viewer guessed correctly that Steve can take a picture of Blue and Magenta with his camera and say, smile. Steve was about to sing the celebratory song when the doorbell rang. Magenta was here. Blue opened the door to reveal Magenta. And so Steve got his camera ready to take the picture, but he needed help. Before taking the picture, Shovel and Pail come back to remind us how we helped find their friends' footprints. Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper come back to remind us how we helped them make race cars. The thought friends come back dressed as Magenta and Blue. This gave Steve a great idea. Why not take a picture of everyone together? So the viewer took the picture and Steve said, hey, thanks. Then Blue wanted to take some pictures too. After Steve gives Blue the camera, it was time to say so long but sing just one more song. Now let's talk about the episode as a whole. I feel like kids can learn a lot if they want to learn about what friends do with each other. Hanging out with friends is lots of fun no matter what the age. All in all, it's a good episode, and a classic one. I mean, even the ditty Magenta Coming Over is catchy. Now let's talk about what does Blue want to do with her drawing. This episode starts out with Steve saying hi before opening the door for the viewer. The viewer tells him to do so. He did, and apologized. Then he tells the viewer that he and Blue were drawing a picture. Blue finished the outline and colored it in. Steve thought it looked great and wanted to hang it on the refrigerator. Blue didn't want to. She wanted to do something else with her drawing. The question was, what does Blue want to do with her drawing? That's when Blue wanted to play Blues Clues. But first Steve had to clean up the paw print. The first step into cleaning the paw print was to spray it. The next step was to take the sponge and wipe up the drippy parts. The next step was to get the handy-dandy notebook. And so the game Blue's Clues has begun. The viewer spotted the first clue, which is a stamp. After finding the first clue, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper called Steve to the kitchen. It turned out there had been a mysterious ice cream cone maker in the kitchen. The problem was, they don't know who it is. Steve and the viewer wanted to help. They looked at the evidence. A scooper, ice cream, cones, and sprinkles. The main evidence was definitely the sprinkles, because it made a trail out the door. The sprinkles trail led to the picnic table, which was covered with sprinkles and melted ice cream. After going to the picnic table, the mystery maker went back inside into the front door and into the bathroom. It turned out the mystery maker was Blue all along. After the mystery was solved, the viewer spotted the second clue, which is an envelope. After the second clue was found, a fell friend called to Steve. He got dressed all by himself. Sort of. He felt a little uncomfortable. He needed help putting the clothes in the right order so he would feel better. First he put on his socks and then his shoes. Then he put on his shirt, his sweater, and his coat in the right order. He thanked Steve for helping him. Then Bull and Spatula from the bakery wanted to make muffins. Banana muffins. Blue skidooed there. Steve did too. The problem was, the recipe for banana muffins was all mixed up. They needed help putting the recipe in the right order. The first step was to mix the ingredients. The second step was to pour the batter into a tin. The third step was to bake them. The final step was to put them on a plate. Now that they got the steps in the right order, it was time to make them. They went over the steps successfully. The thing was, they couldn't eat the muffins till after lunch, but they thanked Steve and the viewer for helping them. Then Blue and Steve skidooed home, and the viewer spotted the third clue, which is mailbox. That's when Steve realized it was time for the last step. Sit in the thinking chair. It was time to think. We were trying to figure out what Blue wants to do with her drawing, and our clues were a stamp, an envelope, and mailbox. Steve thought, what if Blue folded the drawing so that it fits in the envelope and put a stamp on it? Then the viewer said that the next step would be to mail it. Blue wanted to mail the drawing. At that point, Steve realized we just figured out Blue's Clues. After the celebratory song, Blue took out the drawing, folded it, and put it in the envelope with a stamp on it. She wanted to mail the drawing to Magenta. Mailbox made sure it got delivered right away. That's when Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper come back to remind them that the mystery maker was Blue. The fell friend comes back, and this time he got dressed all by himself. Bull and Spatula comes back to remind us that we helped them make banana muffins. Then it was mail time. Mailbox said that he delivered the letter to Magenta, and she sent another one back. Steve thought that process was really fast. The letter showed our friends and Magenta. Our friends told Blue that Magenta got her letter. In return, they said thank you, and Magenta licks the camera. After reading a great letter from Magenta, it was time to say so long, but sing just one more song. Now let's talk about the episode as a whole. I feel like kids can learn a lot if they want to learn about doing certain things in the chronological order. I have autism, so I can understand how things need to be in a certain way, and in a certain order, and in a certain pattern. All in all, it's a good episode. So yeah, that's Magenta Comes Over. If you would like to play again, just go back to the beginning of this episode. And remember, you can do anything that you want to do. Bye!